When I'm working on a script, you know, and very much so in a case of a period piece like Master and Commander, I like to have around me as I'm working at least something from the period. In the case of this film, I went a little further than that. I found this this shop in London, Blunderbuss Antiques. I might as well give them a plug. And left a large part of the salary that I was paid for this film, I think, in buying all kinds of naval stuff. I mean, look at this. This is very rare. It's a Marines crossbelt. Anyway, I would have these things on my desk. I mean, I don't know, it might sound like it's a way of putting off doing the writing, but, you know, put a little music on from the period because I had to listen to find what I thought might be the cabin music, that pieces I would like for Stephen and Jack to play. There was plenty of guides in the books, Corelli. To put my hand out, you know, look at this telescope, beautiful telescope I got in London, and to just touch it. I don't know, it doesn't matter how often you read that something happened in history and that it's true. It's true, people walked on the moon, we know that, but I mean, what a difference to actually go and walk on the moon. What a difference to touch a rock from the moon. And so it is with the past. You can know there was a Troy. You can know that there was a Rome, a Roman Empire, but to go there and touch the stones, that's something. I remember a quote of Eisenstein's when he was doing a survey with Edvard Thiess for Alexander Nevsky, and they were in Nizhny Novgorod, the city that featured in their story and had featured in the history of the Hun invasion. And he said, if these stones could speak, he said as he touched them. So that's how it is with me. And as part of my preparation for that writing job with John Colley and in adapting Patrick O'Brien's work, I went, of course, to Greenwich Museum, which is quite fantastic and is the home of and centre of British naval history. And there was plenty to look at and later to touch, even if with rubber gloves, in the case of uniforms. From there down to see the Victory, Peter Goodwin, the curator there, took me over to stand where Nelson was shot at the Battle of Trafalgar, to go down below to see where they lay him as his life ebbed. Prepped me. So by the time I came to face that dreaded white page and to begin the script with John, I felt at least prepared. And part of the preparation had been also travelling on 2 trips on the Endeavour replica. It was built in Perth, magnificent vessel it is, the greatest recreation vessel afloat, I think. And it's unique in that the weather deck, the top deck, is period accurate, and so too is the berth deck below. So all we voyage crew sleep in hammocks, as the crew did in that period. We don't eat the same food, but you can imagine that. And you work the ship, and you work it immediately that you sign on, having signed your life away in terms of insurance. You put in a watch. I was on the foremast watch, and you are sent, as in our case, it was about midnight, we were leaving harbour up the northern coast of New South Wales, sent up to take in some sail, and you find yourself unbelievably, well, with a safety harness, but nevertheless climbing up the rigging, up over the futtock shrouds to the fighting top. That's a test of courage of some kind. You just don't want to make a fool of yourself by falling to your death, but you do have to lean out as you go up to that platform. shrouds are the actual ropes, you might think of them, that people climb up. So the futtock shrouds would go from the base here up to the top of this platform, which is called a fighting top. So you actually have to lean out as you climb up. Obviously, if the ship is tilted, the best time to climb is when it's tilted that way. But sometimes when it's just sailing along, all your weight is wanting to drag you back down to the deck, to your death or your broken back or whatever, life in hospital. So it's something of a kind of test for the ingenue.
But we made it.
I must say I never got used to it. Never. I've probably done it 3 or 4 times. That was an experience and something I think that helped with the whole journey in settling down to write this piece. I'd like to talk a little bit about the books. 20 books, 20 volumes, and working with John Colley, what I did was mark them all up, as you see here, these now relics, personal relics of that year of script writing with John, who himself was a doctor, I'm pleased to say, so there was a degree of accidental matching up with the novel with John. So we'd take a book, you know, it's Far Side of the World, and just mark it up in various sections. You know, well, let me read a couple of headings. You know, it's obviously there's Jack and Stephen. Jack and Stephen discuss flogging. A ship game called King Arthur. Mixing grog and how to do that. Wardrobe note here. And so it was done with all the 20 books. And then we photocopied those later on and had them put into their own separate category, like life on board or gunnery practice, or Jack and Stephen. There was a book on Jack and Stephen, of course, and a book on Jack and a book on Stephen. These then became very handy to give to department heads who could not possibly read all the books before shooting, and the same with the actors. And they will find it very helpful. But that's also because O'Brien's research is so complete, so thorough. I came across his trail a couple of times. I remember in London they pointed out that's where he used to sit in that corner at Greenwich Museum, in that seat over there. You know, I could imagine him, you know, looking like Maturin sitting in the corner there. He might have been looking at this, Encyclopedia Britannica. This encyclopedia, I bought this set here in Los Angeles, and then read that O'Brien had the same set. And I can understand now where he got a lot of his material from, because inside this Encyclopedia Britannica, I think it's certainly 1790s, are a lot of the incidents, details of his very books. You know, for example, there's quite a section on shipbuilding. Here's one that shows you the scantlings, as they call it. And on one particular page in here is almost a kind of visual synopsis of O'Brien's very themes of Maturin and nature, the ships and Jack, war, and the arguments that Jack and Stephen shared.
We have no time for your doctor. I fucking told him that. Told him, mate. Told him. He will be back. He will be back.
Of course, people know that the encyclopedia was the kind of portable university of the 18th century. And it's still impressive to look inside volumes like these. I mean, one for how much you don't know. It's amazing how easily we can patronize the past, just because it was in black and white. Anyway, I put these on the set.
Action. I was merely remarking that you've always prided yourself on not being a flogging captain, and this seems such a trivial offence.
Russell and Paul and I tried to work scenes out that would involve them more completely, but nevertheless I got it in a couple of shots, as all of my swords, because again I like to feel that there's something humming away there from the past and may bring us good luck. Or if you like, for the actors, I think, for them to feel that they're touching something that is from the period. So, finally you have to write, unfortunately. You can put it off by buying swords and going on ships and visiting Greenwich, but one day you face that white sheet of paper. And as anyone who's written anything knows, it can be terrifying. Although I must say I like the quote of Vincent van Gogh, who said of the white canvas should be frightened of me. And that was rather encouraging. Paintings were very important as a source of inspiration and for lighting and for feeling, particularly in talking to the CGI houses, to Asylum and to ILM, and as talking points in meetings for the physical effects, what I was attempting, as much as for the camera to get an idea of the lighting and of the feeling. Here, this is very key still, this is the prompt. This was a true incident that occurred in the Caribbean, in which this British frigate lost her mizzenmast. This became the staging of the storm and that particular incident. Battle, of course. There were, very many meetings about how to get the smoke right, how to get the feeling right, how to move the miniatures or the CG ships. And the paintings, really for all departments, became our guide. In some cases, the paintings were from the period. I think rarely was the artist on board. I don't think many artists went to war in that period on ships. But nevertheless, they spoke to sailors and they got an idea of what it looked like. But we also had a number of contemporary artists whose work I admired and included in the folders of research material. Films I looked at during the period, I would select. In the documentary area, there's one outstanding film, and that is Irving Johnson's Round the Horn. It was one of the last great voyages round the Horn by a square rigger. And this very brave young man, it was his first voyage. He'd practiced by climbing telephone poles before he left to get ready and fit for climbing the mast. And he took a camera. And his footage in this very, very heavy storm became a key inspiration. And in fact, there's one or two images which I did reproduce, putting our dump tanks, in our case, in a position that would give me the kind of wave action that he photographed on board, at the risk of his life in his case. What a film. What an admirable man Irving Johnson was. I used to joke with crew and say that we were the Admiralty Film Unit, as if the camera had been invented at the time and we were going back in time. I didn't want an armchair view of the period. And that's respecting O'Brien, because that's how he wrote. He wrote really as almost like a late 18th century, early 19th century man. You could have passed the books off in a way, in some bizarre literary fraud, as from the period. And to see the little bit I have seen of O'Brien interviewed, he does himself seem like some kind of time traveller, an 18th century man of the Enlightenment, a Dr. Maturin, you're very tempted to say.
I'm sorry that you lost the majority of your collection, Steve.
Well, worse things happen at sea. In actual fact,
In fact, I used to got so deeply into it that, and fans of the books will understand this, that if I was going on it myself on a long journey, I remember a trip from Sydney to Washington, I would calculate it was a 3-book trip and would arm myself with the 3 volumes ahead. And in fact, on that particular trip, I ran out in Washington. So like some bizarre, O'Brien junkie, there I was running through the streets looking for a bookshop that had O'Brien stacked. Do you have volume 10? Yes, we do. Oh, thank you. Put in a brown paper bag. But those fans will understand just how he can involve. It's easier to make a good film of a bad book. The corollary is dangerously true. It's terribly challenging to attempt to make a decent film of a good book, let alone what's virtually a 5,000-page book in terms of these volumes. If you have too much respect, you can trip yourself up. You can create a kind of a fetish out of it. You can make an altar out of it, but it's not much good to the audience. It still has to work as a film. And to translate a book to the screen, well, it's just as different as creating music from a book. It would seem, because actors speak dialogue, to be very similar. It's not true. And by the time you took one of these books and shook this beautiful prose out of it, it didn't have much of a plot. O'Brien didn't write for the movies, thank God. And so the plots are not what you particularly recall, with some remarkable